Nowhere to Call Home by Cynthia DeFelice. Chapter 5. The cab arrived promptly at 8 o'clock. From the window of her bedroom, Frances watched it pull up to the house. She knew she should go downstairs, but she didn't move. There was a gentle knock at the bedroom door, and Mrs. Bailey's voice said, "Miss Frances, your taxi is here." Still, Frances didn't move. "Miss Frances?" Frances took a deep breath, picked up her carpet bag, and opened the door. "Thank you, Mrs. Bailey," she said. "I'm ready now." Junius and the other servants were gathered in the foyer to say goodbye. Frances felt herself being swept from one farewell embrace to another. Bridget handed her a bundle tied in a cloth. "It's food for your journey, miss," Bridget whispered as she hugged Frances to her. Mrs. Bailey's crisp, starched shirtwaist crackled against Frances's cheek. The front of Mary's dress was wet with tears. Gordon, usually so dignified, patted Frances's shoulder awkwardly. With a quaver in his voice, he said, "You take good care, Miss Frances." Junius lifted her right up and held her to him for a long time before setting her down gently on the floor. Frances had her harmonica in her pocket, and she squeezed it as hard as she could to keep from crying. She looked at the servants one last time. "I won't ever forget you," she said in a choked voice. Then she turned away, picked up her traveling bag, opened the door, and descended the steps to the street. A chilly November wind blew dry leaves through the streets as the taxi carried Frances to the train station. Her mind was spinning in desperate circles. If only she had more time to think. But the station was just 3 blocks away. Everything was happening too fast. Her cab pulled up behind the other taxis near the busy entrance to Broad Street Station. When the driver announced the fare, Frances paid him 40 cents from the money Cleveland Fletcher had given her. He opened the door, helped her to the sidewalk, and set her bag down beside her. Frances wanted to see what he would do next. Had Cleveland Fletcher arranged for the cabbie to come into the station with her and see that she got on the right train? Evidently not. However, he did whistle for a red-capped porter, who stepped right up, took Frances's bag, and asked for her ticket. He examined it and smiled. "You traveling in style, missy. Come with me now, and I'll get you settled." Frances followed the porter into the huge, bustling building. They climbed a wide, sweeping staircase, passing the dining room, the barber shop, the general waiting room, and the women's waiting room, on their way to the track area. There the red cap turned Frances over to a Pullman porter, who escorted her to her car and led her inside. After placing her bag on the luggage rack, he showed her the workings of the toilet, the sink, the fold-down berth, and the window curtains. Then he gave her back her ticket and said, "Conductor'll be around after a while to collect your ticket. Have a pleasant trip, miss." Frances suddenly remembered seeing Father tipping waiters and porters, and she fumbled in her pocket for her money. She had no idea what a proper tip was. She handed the porter $1, and his face broke into a wide grin of pleasure and amazement. "Thank you, miss," he said. "You have a real pleasant trip now, you hear?" Frances had never had much reason to think about money. She'd never actually had any money of her own. If she needed something, Mrs. Bailey or her father took care of getting it for her. From the porter's reaction, she deduced that $1 was a lot of money, at least for a tip. She looked out the window, then down at the envelope in her hand that held her ticket. Railroad fare, $29.46. Compartment fare, $23.25. Total, $52.21, it said. She opened the envelope and examined the ticket and the timetable inside. "Redemption of tickets," she read. "Tickets unused or partially used will be redeemed under tariff regulations at full value." She held in her hand a ticket that was worth $52.71. Then she added it to the cash remaining in her bag. She realized that she had $61.31. If she traded in her ticket, she'd have a lot of money. The train whistle was sounding. Glumly, Frances stared out the window as the engine hissed and the train pulled away from the station, moved several blocks, and crossed the Schuylkill River. To her surprise, after traveling just a few minutes more, the train came to a stop. The conductor called 30th Street Station. From her window, Frances saw more passengers hurrying to board the train. They looked eager and full of purpose, as if they were headed somewhere important, somewhere they wanted to go. Before she had time to think any more about it, Frances was on her feet. She grabbed her carpet bag, ran down the steps at the end of her Pullman car, and stepped out onto the platform. Head down, her bag banging against her shins and her heart banging against her ribs, she hurried toward the station, half expecting someone to come chasing after her. No one paid her the slightest attention. In line at the ticket window, she waited impatiently, looking over first one shoulder, then the other. "Stop it," she told herself. "No one here knows you. No one cares what you do." Stepping up at last, she said, "I'd like to—" What was the word? She pulled out her ticket and read it quickly. "I'd like to redeem this for full value, please." The man at the window examined her ticket and looked at her. "You just got on the train, miss, at Broad Street." He left his words hanging, a question. "I know, but I've changed my mind. I forgot something," she said. The man's eyes scanned the faces in the line behind her. "Are you traveling alone?" he asked. "Yes, I'm going to Chicago to visit my aunt, but I forgot something, so I'd better go back for it and catch a later train." "Is your aunt expecting you?" "Yes." "You be sure and let her know you're changing trains, or she'll worry." "Yes, sir," Frances said with relief. But the man wasn't finished. "How about if I just give you a ticket for the train to Chicago later this afternoon? How's that?" "No, if you'll please redeem the ticket. I'll take a cab home from here and get the thing I forgot. Then I'll see what my aunt and my father want me to do." Frances wasn't accustomed to lying, and was sure that the man could tell that was what she was doing. But he merely shrugged and said, "All right, miss, as you please. I won't even charge you for crossing the river." He handed her some bills and change, and then, to her dismay, signaled for a porter. "Find this young lady a cab, please," he told the red cap. Frances followed the porter to the cab entrance, where he whistled for a taxi and helped her inside. She felt ready to burst with frustration. "Where to?" asked the cabbie in a bored voice. "Just a minute," Frances said, watching the red cap head back into the station. As soon as he was out of sight, she opened the door, jumped out of the taxi, and began to run. The cabbie startled, "What the?" ringing in her ears.